I don't know how they do it, but it never happened to me, and it becomes very tricky and very expensive. So this package will go in the fridge today. Hi guys, welcome back to 17 square meters garden. In today's video we are gonna be sowing seeds of biennial plants, and I'm sure that most of you already know what biennial plants are, but just in case if you are a beginner gardener and you have never heard that term before, biennial plants are plants that grow for 2 years, but in the first year they only produce vegetative growth, so they only produce leaves, and then they bloom in the second year. That's why we have to sow them ahead of time. Usually we sow biennial plant seeds sometime in June, July, then we transplant them into their final location, whether that be in a flower bed or in a final container, late autumn. Then they overwinter outside, and then they bloom in the spring or early summer, depending on what plant it is. So if you would like to learn more about biennial plants and how to sow specific ones from seeds, please continue watching, because that's exactly what we are gonna do in today's video. There are obviously many beautiful biennial plants to choose from. I picked 3 different plants for my balcony garden for the next spring-summer season. I'm sure that many of you will message me afterwards asking where I bought the seeds from. So I'm gonna put the name of the page on the screen. It's the first time that I'm ordering from this website. It's a Dutch page, Dutch shop. And when I showed on Instagram that I bought from them, someone actually messaged me and said, I all the time order from them, they are amazing, their seeds are really great quality. So that's exciting. They delivered in 3 working days from the Netherlands to France. So that's awesome. That never happened to me before. I usually have to wait like 2 weeks for anything to be delivered in France. So I have 3 different seeds. First of all, I have some pansies. So I have Viola Wittrockiana, Swiss Giants Blue with Blotch. So it's a really large pansy flower in purplish, bluish colors. And then I have Viola Wittrockiana Rococo. And Rococo is like my favorite pansy ever. I grew them last year and I totally fell in love with them. They have ruffled petals. They are absolutely gorgeous. They don't really look like you can see here in the picture. They are not such warm tones. They're more like purple, bluish, creamy yellows. I'm gonna show you some pictures on the screen. And I picked also some forget-me-nots, Myosotis sylvatica, and now I have blue ones. They are called Indigo compacta. They are smaller than the classic forget-me-nots, because the classic forget-me-nots, they grow about 20 to 30 centimeters tall and wide, and the compacta grows only 10 to 20 centimeters tall. So they are perfect for like windowsills and for small containers. And I also have a pink forget-me-nots, but these are taller. They are 20 to 30 centimeters tall. They are called Rose. And the last plant is my must-have. I grow it every year on my balcony, Digitalis purpurea Foxgloves. So I have the classic Digitalis purpurea, and I also have Digitalis purpurea Dalmatian Peach F1 hybrid. So when I will sow the foxgloves, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the F1 hybrid. What does it even mean? What are the advantages, and why are the seeds so expensive compared to other seeds? So let's begin. Okay, so before we start sowing, let me quickly show you my setup. It's really simple. I'm repurposing all the lettuce boxes as my seed trays. They have drainage holes at the bottom. So I'm gonna be sowing all of my seeds into seed trays today, and then once they germinate, once they have about 1 or 2 sets of true leaves, I'm gonna then transplant them into their separate plastic pots, and they are gonna grow on in those plastic pots until autumn, and then in autumn, late autumn, beginning of winter, I'm gonna transplant them to their final location. That means to their final containers, and that's how they're gonna overwinter. As my potting mix, I'm using seeds and cuttings potting mix. You could use a multi-purpose, but make sure that it's not pre-fertilized. Okay, first let's start by foxgloves. A few words about foxgloves. Why I love them so much is, first of all, because they are very striking plants. Like whenever I have them on my balcony or on my in-laws balcony, because I also plant them on my in-laws balcony, whenever someone sees them, they're always very impressed, and they're always like, wow, what is this plant? I've never seen a plant like that being grown on a balcony. They are very tall, but they're also very strong. Like they don't need to be staked. They won't break in the wind. My terrace is very windy and never had a foxglove break in the wind. Pollinators absolutely love them. But one thing to keep in mind is that digitalis are poisonous. So if you have children, if you have pets, might not be the best idea to grow them. But other than that, they are absolutely amazing. And as I said, I picked classic foxglove, and I also picked F1 hybrid. So now let's talk about that F1 hybrid. Okay, so I don't want to bore you with too many horticultural details, but I thought that might be worth mentioning, because if you don't know what F1 hybrid means, and if you ever go to a garden center to pick some beautiful flowers for your balcony or terrace, and you see a seed packet tagged as F1 hybrid, because there are also vegetable F1 hybrids and ornamental and vegetable plants. So if you're wondering why are they so expensive, what does it mean? It's a hybrid, so does it mean that it's genetically modified? So that's not good, I shouldn't be buying them. So let's explain a little bit about what it means and what they are. So first, F1 stands for first filial generation. And now the plant breeder that creates F1 hybrids first has to establish two pure inbred parent lines. So it means they need two pure lines of certain digitalis, but problem, they become very weak because there's not enough genetical diversity. So the parent lines become very weak, and it becomes very tricky and very expensive to keep them going. That also justifies the cost of F1 hybrids, is because the parent lines that created F1 hybrid are difficult and expensive to keep alive. But what is interesting, even though the parent lines are very weak, when they breed them together to create F1 hybrid, that F1 hybrid surprisingly becomes sort of a super plant. F1 hybrids usually are really great performers. Like if it is an ornamental plant, usually it has more flowers, the flowers are larger. If it's a vegetable crops, it will produce more vegetables. They also show great resistance to pests and diseases. Some F1 hybrids are especially bred to be resistant to a certain pest or disease that other plants from the same category, let's say, wouldn't be resistant to. So there are many advantages of growing F1 hybrids. Generally, they are exceptional performers, produce more flowers, bigger flowers, they are more resistant. That also justifies the price. A few disadvantages to F1 hybrids. First, obviously, you can't gather the seeds from F1 hybrids because they will not come true to type. And second thing, maybe that's kind of like a minor disadvantage, is that, as I mentioned, because the parent lines are expensive and difficult to keep alive, the breeder sometimes decides that after a few years they decide that it's no longer worth to keep those parent lines, it's no longer worth for them to produce those F1 hybrid seeds, and only the breeder who has the parent lines can create that specific F1 hybrid. So if a breeder decides, well, I no longer want to produce these seeds, you won't be able to find them anywhere. So if you have like a favorite, and after a few years it may not be available on the market anymore. So that's one disadvantage as well. So what is so special about this particular F1 hybrid Dalmatian peach foxglove is, as I mentioned, the classic foxglove. As any biennial plant, you sow it 1 year and then they bloom in the second year, but this one can already bloom the first year. So I am not going to be sowing it today. I will wait until spring, and in the spring I'm going to sow them indoors, and then once the risk of frost has passed, I'm gonna plant them out on my balcony, and they are gonna bloom the same spring. So they are gonna bloom in the spring, then I'm gonna keep them, and they are gonna bloom again next year. So you get 2 years of blooms instead of just 1. Pretty amazing. I have my potting mixer ready, and I'm just gonna moisten it a little bit so that the seeds adhere better to the soil. And as I said, I'm only sowing the classic Digitalis purpurea. So whoops, that's too much. Okay, I'm just gonna sprinkle it on top of soil. That's largely enough. And because the seeds are so tiny, it's best not to cover them with soil, because if you cover them with soil, they will have a hard time germinating, because they need light in order to germinate. So just gently press them into the soil. Okay, so now I'm gonna water them once again, and I'm using a spray bottle because it's more gentle flow of water. Like if you were to use a watering can or anything else, it's, you know, it's too strong and you're gonna dislodge your seeds, or you're gonna bury your seeds too deep and then they will fail to germinate. So spray bottle is a really good idea to water your seedlings. And I know that, you know, it's really hard to know how often you should water, but at this stage they really don't need a lot of water. Like you don't need to fully saturate the soil because they are just tiny seedlings laying on the surface of the soil. So just sprinkle them a little bit with water every day. When you see that the soil starts to dry out, you can tell when the soil starts to dry out. Just sprinkle them a little every day. Keep them in a sunny location. I'm gonna keep them on the balcony here. They receive morning sunlight, that will be perfect. And yeah, at this point you could also put a humidity dome to keep the moisture in, to prevent the soil from drying out. But if you are gonna use the humidity dome, once you start to see the seeds germinate, you have to take it off, because don't keep humidity dome too long. Like some people keep humidity dome until their seedlings are like really large. I mean, I wouldn't take the risk, because the more humidity you have, the more chances of fungal disease development. So better to take the humidity dome off immediately after you start to see your seeds germinating. They should germinate somewhere between 7 days to 14 days. Okay, so next I'm gonna sow forget-me-not seeds, and because I don't need a lot of them, I'm gonna divide this seed tray into two parts. Here I'm gonna sow the pink ones, here I'm gonna sow the blue ones. And I thought I would show you once, as I said, once the seedlings have like two sets of true leaves, I'm gonna be transplanting them into these kind of plastic containers. And with my azotes, I think I'm gonna transplant several seedlings into one pot like this to have, you know, fuller look and more blooms in one pot. So that's what I'm gonna do once they germinate. But just like with foxgloves, pretty straightforward. You just moisten the soil. And gently sprinkle on top of soil. Okay, and I left the most tricky part, the most tricky seeds at the end. Now, I spoke with many people who grow pansies, and everyone has a different method. And it works differently for everyone, so I'm just gonna show you my method and what works for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best method or the easiest one or whatever. That's just my method, that's how I was taught. And also, I was taught that pansies and violas, they are biennial plants, so they should be seeded as biennial plants. But there are people out there who say, I seed my pansies, within 3 months they bloom. I don't know how they do it, but it never happened to me. I grew many different pansy varieties and never ever they would bloom in 3 months from sowing. They always acted as biennial plants for me, so I treat them as biennials. This way, at least I'm sure that I'm sure and I know when they are gonna bloom when I sow them like this. Also, some people cold stratify them, some people don't stratify them. So generally, some seeds, they have a sort of a protection that prevents them from germinating at the wrong time of the year, because in the nature, when the seed falls on the ground, it doesn't necessarily germinate right away. They have some protective system, and they only germinate after certain weather conditions or certain environmental conditions occur. And that's the case for pansies. They need to go through a cold period for the seeds to break the dormancy and to germinate. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna sow them, cold stratify them, and then they are gonna bloom for me. They start to bloom usually around January, February here. So that's my method. If you know another method that works better, then you're free to share it in the comments. I'm curious to learn more about it. I'm sowing the entire packet of seeds because there is not a lot of them and I want as many pansies as possible. Pansies, in order to germinate, they need darkness. They germinate in darkness, so we have to put them in a black plastic bag. And then I'm gonna cold stratify them. As I said, to break that seed dormancy, to make sure that the seeds are gonna germinate. I mean, some of them could germinate without probably, but to ensure good germination rate, we are gonna cold stratify them. I'm gonna cut some holes for ventilation. Okay, so now this package will go in the fridge, and in that fridge it will remain for about 2 to 3 weeks. I'm gonna put my alarm clock, obviously, to not forget about them. And once they are in the fridge, usually you don't need to water them because they don't dry out as if, you know, they were grown outdoors, because it's cold in the fridge. They have a plastic bag on top of them. But I'm gonna keep an eye on them, gonna check once a week if they don't dry out. If they do, then I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of water. And after those 2 to 3 weeks in the fridge, I'm gonna bring them on my balcony, still in the plastic bag, because as I said, they need darkness in order to germinate. So I'm gonna keep them in this plastic bag on my balcony. Usually within a week I will start to see first seeds germinating, and once I see those first seeds germinating, I'm gonna take the plastic bag off to give them the proper, you know, amount of light that the seedling needs once they start to grow, once they start to develop. And just like with other seedlings, once I see, you know, first 2 sets of true leaves, I'm gonna then separate them, transplant them into their separate pots, and they are gonna remain in those separate pots until autumn, when I plant them in their final location. Okay, you guys, so it's done, and it is gonna be it for today's video. I hope that it inspired you to grow some biennial plants on your balcony or on your terrace. If you do grow some biennial plants from seeds, I'm very curious to know which ones. Please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you again next Saturday. Bye!